really bad deal for landowners. So that's what our two speakers are going to present about tonight. Sarah Ray has done a fantastic job with materials. Sheila has done a great job bringing this all together. Mary, really huge thanks to the church for letting us use this space. And also Joe and Craig, who are going to be presenting tonight.
And Sue Lisk.
And Sue Lisk, who has done fantastic work securing the venue and doing...
And Nancy Berry.
Nancy Berry as well. Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else, or we're good? So what we're going to do first, Joe Heath is going to speak. He's an attorney based out of Onondaga. And then Craig Stevens is going to speak. That'll go on for about an hour. And then we'll do a little bit of Q&A. And we'll go from there. Hopefully we'll all learn a lot tonight, and we'll move in that way. So Joe Heath has been a general counsel for the Onondaga Nation since 1982. He's been an attorney since 1975. For the nation, his work centers on environmental protection, particularly under the Clean Water Act, focusing on Onondaga Lake and Onondaga Creek, archaeological site and unmarked burial site protection, NAGPRA, repatriation and litigation, hunting and fishing rights, treaty rights, excise tax issues, and land rights. Joe has been researching the issue of fracking and has shared his knowledge of the many different environmental dangers created by fracking with community groups for 5 years. For the past 2.5 years, he's been educating landowners on how to terminate their leases and manage the many questionable ways that gas companies are seeking to extend old leases. So Joe is going to be first to present. I'm really happy to have him here. He's one of the most knowledgeable people about the legal issues around pipelines in New York State. So let's give Joe a warm welcome.
Try it without the mic. Can you hear me in that? Or do you want me to use this?
They probably would with the kids, it would be better with that.
All right.
There's the door now.
Our lawyers to talk without waving our hands around, so we'll see what we can do. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming. We're here to talk about a proposed pipeline that we learned about in May. It's the Millennium Company. Those of you who live down in Broome County here are familiar with the Millennium because they already have an east-west pipeline. And what we learned in May is that they have now proposed to build another pipeline that would run north and south. This is a general map of it. I hope you can see some of it. It would link the Millennium down here with the Tennessee Gas pipeline up north. It's not about serving customers along the way, it's about moving gas between the two pipelines, and generally about moving frack gas out of Pennsylvania so that the companies can sell it in larger markets and export it to the east and actually to the west as well. We'll come back to that. But that's the general pipeline map that we learned about in May. This is a 24-inch pipeline, which is a very large pipeline, relatively large pipeline. It'll run at about 1,200 pounds a square inch. That's very high pressure. It's an industrial pipeline. What we're going to cover tonight, well, we'll come back to that. First, I want to explain to you where we are in the regulatory process. In May, we saw...
Yeah, just a quick one, Joe. You do realize Millennium is only like a mile south of Maine? The east-west Millennium is only about a mile south of us.
Okay. I'm very hard of hearing. It's very hard for me to hear questions from the floor. We'll have to deal with that afterwards, so I apologize for that. I got the best hearing aids I can buy, but there's only so much you can do with it as you get on. So this is a large pipeline. It's going to be regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It's FERC. It's an agency which we haven't had a lot of experience with in New York, but we're trying to learn about it as we go along. In order for them to build the pipeline, they needed the right of eminent domain. And they don't get that until FERC issues them what's called a Certificate of Public Necessity. We are several steps away from that now. We're very early on in the regulatory process. And that really gives us an advantage over other areas. Because the next step will be pipeline landmen coming to your door, giving you a rush job. And we'll go into the details of that later. And we're fortunate here because we've been able to learn from other people who have pipelines coming through their communities and what they advised us in May when landmen come to their door. I've spent the last 3 years trying to help people out of leases that were signed before people knew what was coming. And after people learned what was coming and learned that they weren't told the whole story, a lot of people didn't want their leases anymore. It's not that simple to get out of them. As bad as leases are, what is given away in order for them to build a pipeline is an easement. That's a permanent right to use a certain portion of your land for the particular reasons listed in the easement. Once an easement is signed, it's permanent. It won't go away unless the company agrees for it to go away. So it's a much more drastic infringement upon your property rights. And what we want to do tonight is share with you as much as we can about what to expect when they come to your door. FERC's approval rate for these kinds of applications is 99%. So we have to do a lot of work before these final applications get in. There are 3 main steps along the process before they get their certificate. We've been through the first step, which happened in May, the non-binding open season announcement. That was in May. That's essentially an announcement by the company to see if there are customers who want the gas. That's how we learned about this. That's how we got this map. The next step, which we had expected and the agency had expected in September, is called the pre-filing application. That opens a more formal process in FERC. You get a FERC filing number, and that's when interested citizens and groups can intervene in the FERC process, become a party essentially in the FERC process. We're not going to go over that tonight. We will come back around and do more education about that when we get closer to that. And then finally, after that, there's a formal filing, and again, the interveners have more of a right to be heard and to get information, and then FERC evaluates the application. So the next step that we expect is the pre-filing and the landman coming to property owners' doors. Unlike fracking, where we've come to understand that towns have a great deal of power through their zoning codes and home rule, there's almost no local control over a pipeline. Towns cannot ban pipelines. They're preempted by the federal law. Towns can ban compressors, and compressors are a very important part of pipelines. They have to move the gas, and they also use them to increase the capacity and therefore the risk involved. There would be at least one pipeline one compressor along this route. We'll come back to what compressors look like and what happens around them in a little bit. And there's very little state control. So mainly, the only thing between us and this pipeline is a federal agency with a 99% approval rate. We have a lot of work to do, in other words. And that's why we're out trying to educate people as much as we can. There's some intervention or control by DEC, the state environmental agency. That's mainly where this will cross stream crossings. Now, this pipeline is intended to run along the same route as the old Sun Oil pipeline, a 6-inch gas pipeline. And they may come to your door and say, well, we already have an easement to run a pipeline across your property. Their problem is those easements are much too limited for them to build a new high-pressure, high-volume 24-inch pipeline, and so they need to get more from you. If they come to your door and said, we have an easement that says we can do what we want here, what we advise is that you say, you leave me a copy of that document so that I can go talk with an attorney about it. We did one of these last week or the week before, I think, in Lafayette, up in Onondaga County. And after that, one of the landowners sent me a copy of their 1930 easement for the Sun Pipeline. It's very inadequate. It would not give, it's the first one we've really been able to ferret out because these are so old that they're hard to find in the clerk's office. And I've been researching the law around that since it came in on Monday. And they could not build this pipeline across that easement. They would have to get more rights given to them or taken from the landowner. So that's the introduction that I wanted to share with you. This is another map of the route, and generally you can see that it comes from Broome County up through Cortland, up through Onondaga, and then hooks up with hooks these two pipelines up. We'll have town maps in just a minute. What we're going to cover tonight is we really want to tell people, do not sign when they come to your door. Beware of the landman coming to your door. Their interests are the company's interests. They get royalties for however many people they can sign up. They're not there with your interests in mind. They may claim that. We've seen letters that they sent out in other pipeline situations where they claim to represent both the company and the landowner. An obvious conflict of interest. So, and those of you who know about leases and what landmen did there, we have to learn from those lessons so that they don't take advantage of people again. We've been over pretty much what the Millennium has proposed. We will go over what comes along with the pipeline, because there are other hazards. Where we are in the FERC process, we've done that. History of pipeline explosions, fires, and leaks. Where is this Pennsylvania frac gas going to go? And then where you have some resources that you can find information on the web after this, and what to expect after tonight. So I like to keep these talks current, and this one is yesterday. This is a copy of this is December 3rd, and the headline, if you can't read it, is "Just the Reality." A pipeline safety official admits that he would avoid buying a home near a pipeline. So that's the article. Here's the text, because I know it's very hard to read. So this pipeline official, who was responsible for the community assistance and technical services for the federal agency that regulates pipelines after they're built, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. We have some other information about those later on in the slideshow. This official, Bill Lowry, said on camera that he made a point of ensuring that his home wasn't in the path of any pipelines before buying it, and that he wouldn't advise anyone to build in the path of a pipeline. This is a federal energy regulatory guy saying, do not have a home near a pipeline. He said, when I bought my house, I looked on all the maps, I found that there were no pipelines. That's because something could happen. You're better off if you have a choice. You still have a choice. You can tell them no. So this is a federal safety expert whose job it is to regulate pipelines, telling you you have a choice and to exercise it, and don't let a pipeline near your house. The final quote is, if I was building a house, I wouldn't build it on a pipeline because they're industrial facilities. That's just the reality. That's yesterday's news. So this is where the pipeline starts up north. We'll go over these maps quickly. In the town of Onondaga. Then it comes down through Lafayette. This little jog it takes here is an incredibly dangerous situation around some previous industrial problems caused by salt mining. These are phenomena called mud boils. We'll go over them very quickly because it's not your backyard. We have some pictures of problems down here. This is a very unstable area in the Onondaga, near the Onondaga territory in the Tully Valley, where the land is half liquid, half solid. They want to run their pipeline through that. There's the third picture of that. Then it goes down through the town of Tully, It goes between two glacial lakes and the wetlands there. That's a close-up of that. These are glacially made kettle lakes. This is all state-protected wetlands. This is people's properties. What's happened is that this Sun pipeline was built in 30s, and a lot of homes have been built on the route since then. This is a fairly high-end housing project near Tully. Pipeline goes right underneath some of those homes. This is a marking that you may see on the road, the maps that shows the direction of a pipeline. Once you start looking for these and some of these other signs like this, then you'll have a better idea where the pipeline are. You probably know if these are near your house already. That's taken on Route 80 in Tully. This is from Pennsylvania. They'll run these things wherever it's easiest for them, and if the house is in the way, it's not necessarily much of a concern for them. So the towns that it goes through are listed here. And here it will go through Lisle, Nanticoke, Maine, and Union, where it hooks up with the Millennium. So that is the town of Lisle. If we have maps of this on the back table, if you want to get closer looks at them. I know you can't get too much detail from here. This is down through Nanticoke. And this is a close-up of an area of Nanticoke that you probably know as Glen Albee. And this is a federally protected wetland that it runs underneath, or would run underneath, so that's a problem, clearly. This is a trailer park. This is a blow-up of the trailer park right through these people's yards. And this area, right here, is a cemetery, about 400 feet from the proposed route. So they're not overly, what they did, what somebody did in Oklahoma or wherever the corporate headquarters for this is they said, well, we want to build a north-south pipeline. We know that FERC likes them better if they're in old easements, and so this one looks pretty prime for us. And it looks good on a map. They don't know any of these neighborhoods or any of the sensitive areas that it's going to go through. They've just drawn this thing up basically on a computer, made their nice map, and then they think they'll just put it in or tweak it as they go along. But we're trying to learn as much as we can about the route, so that if any of you know any other areas around here that are concerned, we'd really like to hear about that either this evening or later on. Then it goes down through the town here, and finally down into, just barely into Lisle, where it hooks up with the Millennium. So what we know so far, we've gone over most of this. It's a 24-inch, 1,200 pounds, connecting the two pipelines, at least one compressor station. It'll run along the old easement, and then we have a couple of other steps coming up. Now, compressors, when most of us think of compressors, we think of these little things that you have in your garage to run air tools. And we'll come back to what those really are in just a second. So one of the problems that happens with a pipeline is that it tends to encourage fracking near it, because if you drill a well and you get gas out of the well, you have to get it to market. In order to get it to market, you have to build a pipeline called a gathering line to bring it to larger pipelines and then move it along. And so the shorter your gathering line has to be, the less investment you have to make. There are lots of places in the country now where fracking is going full tilt without pipelines. I just heard a piece on NPR driving down here about the problem of oil in North Dakota, that they don't have enough pipelines. And so they move it by rail. And there are problems with that, as we know from the tragedy in Quebec in July. So the closer that one is to a pipeline, the more danger there is that companies will think this is a good place to frack. The other problem that we have near pipelines is the tendency to store gas. Gas is a seasonal market, And it's produced 24/7, and they like to store gas, particularly in abandoned salt caverns. There are people over in Watkins Glen that are trying to deal with that threat. We have salt caverns up in the Tully Valley near those pictures that I showed you before. You don't want massive amounts of gas stored underground near your home. And then we have compressors and then the power of eminent domain that the companies may get if FERC gives them their certificate. This is a compressor station in Windsor, New York. Bigger than a football field. These are not little operations. And when there's a problem at them, and there's always leaking, there's always methane leaking from these, it's inherent in the operation. There are some infrared videos that you can see on the web, but that's the size. These are, there's a truck there that gives you some perspective as to the size of this thing. Here's the inside. A lot of gas, a lot of pressure, a lot of problems if there's a mistake. This is a propane facility, not really relevant here tonight in my hometown, that the town just issued a moratorium against. That's the map of the location. We'll skip that. So in the FERC process, we said we had the non-binding open season. The next step is the pre-filing and eventually a full FERC application. We're going to encourage people to intervene so that you can express your concerns, get information. We've been over the other agencies that will be involved, and we'll come back around later and share how to intervene, what the difficulties are with that, and what you gain by doing that. You can learn quite a bit on the FERC website. There's some fairly good stuff on it. Some good Q&A that I would recommend. So really what we're trying to tell you tonight is don't sign when they come to your door. And they will tell you that, we'll go over how they try to rush you in just a minute. It's the same kind of deceptive sales pitch that we have seen so much in leases. I've reviewed hundreds of leases in the last 3 years, talked with that many people either directly or over the web, a lot of them directly, and when I go over, well, did you know that you gave away that in your lease? The answer is almost always no. When they say, well, the landman never told me that, and when I raised questions about it, he said not to worry about it. It's the same kind of their pay depends upon getting you to sign. And so you can see again, there's a conflict there. They want you to sign before you get time to think about it and think of all the ramifications. They will tell you, if you don't sign, we're going to take it anyway by eminent domain. One thing to think about right away, if you sign voluntarily, you then become a risk partner with the company. If there's a problem from the pipeline and you've made a voluntary agreement to have them run it through your land, then you will get sued if something happens along with the company. That's not the case if they have to take it from you in eminent domain. So that's one reason that right there to think about things. So to the east of us, there's a proposal that's further advanced called, the company calls it the constitutional pipeline. The people that are in the path of it call it the unconstitutional pipeline. We've seen the letter that that company and the landman send out to the property owners. And these are direct quotes from the letter. There's a lot to be learned here. First of all, they claim that they represent the landowners and the company's best interest. As I said, that's clearly a conflict of interest. Then there's a huge push, financial push, along with whatever they say when they come to your door. But this they put in writing to sign right away. They'll say this is a non-negotiable offer. We want an easement that's 50 to 75 feet wide in this position on your land, and you don't get any say about that. That's non-negotiable. Everything they will tell you is non-negotiable. You don't have to accept that, because it's only non-negotiable when they're there at your door. If they have to go to an eminent domain proceeding, then everything is back on the table, and your rights are much greater than what they'll tell you when they first come to your door. So what they say is, we're going to take this 50, 75-foot strip out of your 40 acres. We are not going to value at all what it would do to the rest of your property. We're just going to take the value of that narrow strip and however many feet long it is, and then give you a certain amount per foot. And they say, so we've come up with a value of $3,000 for your easement. We'll give you $9,000 if you sign in the first 30 days. But if you don't, it'll go up to $6,000. And if you don't sign in the first 60 days, it'll drop to $4,500. And then if you don't do that, we'll take you to court. That's the kind of rush that's going on now to the east of us. I think you can see that inherently there's something wrong with that approach. That's not a fair, open approach that's looking after your interest. One of the reasons it's not looking after your interest is if you go to eminent domain, you're entitled to whatever damage to all of your property. In other words, sometimes you can run a diagonal strip across property and render the rest of it useless for the purposes that you want. And if you have a building lot and they run it in a certain way, you're not going to be able to build on that. So the entire value is what you're entitled to if it goes to eminent domain. And that's why there's such a rush at the beginning. They don't want you to learn that kind of stuff. They want to take advantage of you before you have a chance to think about it. So they'll tell you this is a take it or leave it offer, non-negotiable. The location of the easement they won't discuss. How many future pipes? It's not just one pipe. If they, depending upon the wording of it, they could come along and put 3 or 4 more pipes in it. The Tennessee up north there are 2 pipes running along the same easement. The real damage to the entire property they won't factor in. The destruction of trees. They just cut trees down. People from Pennsylvania can show you pictures of when they run pipelines through. They just mow the trees down and burn them. Then, in order to maintain it over the long run, they don't want anything growing on top of the pipeline. If you let trees grow on top of the pipeline, then they're concerned about the roots and what the roots might do to the pipeline. So they love to use herbicides on their right-of-ways in order to keep the growth down, something that you may have some concerns about. What can go through the pipeline? They're going to tell us this is gas. These days, what they're moving a great deal through pipeline is crude from either fracking or sometimes tar sands crude. When that goes through pipelines, it raises the risk, and that's why we've seen more and more pipeline problems over the last couple of years. And also, they'll say you can't control any other, what they call appurtenant facilities, such as compressors, things like that. In other words, they can put whatever they want to in your easement if you let them take it by their terms. And again, if they say they have the old easement, make them produce it. And then take it to somebody that can help you understand it. We'll be trying to do that as we get to that phase. So that's the general education around what happens when the landman comes to your door. Just say no, listen, make him show you papers if he's claiming something. Take your time, do not get caught in that bum's rush, because your property would then be impacted forever. It would be what you would pass on to your children, that easement. And unfortunately, pipelines blow up. There's no other way to put it. If you want to get a little bit of education about this, just put gas pipeline explosions in Google, and you'll get more information than you want. Wikipedia has pages and pages and pages of pipeline explosions. Some people question whether Wikipedia is a good source or not. I find that the references at the end of those articles are always very helpful. Those are primary references usually. And the Pipeline Hazardous Material Administration, that's the agency that the gentleman we started out calling from. That's a branch of the Department of Transportation. They have information about pipeline explosions. And you just need to understand that this happens. It doesn't happen every pipeline, every day, but one of these could really ruin your day. It could ruin more than your day, as we'll see in just a minute here. We have some examples of 3 very recent ones. Actually, there's one that's happened in the last week that I have now put in here. And we'll go over some of the problems that this company has had with their very new pipeline that runs just to the south of us. So, the worst pipeline explosion was in San Bruno, California on September 9th, 2010. Pretty terrible tragedy. It's a 30-inch gas pipeline that exploded. 8 people killed, 38 homes immediately destroyed, leveled. The only thing you see standing are the chimneys. 38 homes gone. 55 eventually destroyed. The wall of fire more than 1,000 feet high. Took 90 minutes to shut it off because there were no automatic shutoffs. And it created a huge crater. We see a lot of craters after these. So that was September of 2010. About a year and 4 months later, the state independent agency did an audit and concluded that Pacific Gas and Electric, that's the owner of the pipeline, illegally diverted over $100 million from a fund that should have been used for pipeline safety and paid it to their executives and destroyed those people's homes and killed 8 people. That's what we're dealing with here. The most intensely destroyed areas, this is what's left. They just agreed to pay out $565 million to the victims with confidentiality agreements so that the people can't talk. Favorite trick of the companies. But you don't need too much talk to understand that this is not something you want in your neighborhood. This is the recent one that I talked about. This is November 29th of this year, last week. I think it's Friday night, if I remember correctly. An overnight explosion at the Panhandle Eastern Pipeline Company lit up the sky for miles. So that's the article. Here's some of the quotes that we can read. Viewers could see the flames 30 miles away. Sent flames several hundred feet into the air. One woman who lived 20 miles away said that she and her family could see the flames and that she could both hear the explosion and was physically shaken by the blast 20 miles away. The same pipeline, 20 miles to the northeast, where this one blew up, also exploded 5 years ago, causing $1 million damage. This is a quote from a neighbor that said, "It sounded like a plane crash. Then my house started shaking and rattling. Things were flying off the walls. Glass was vibrating. It sounded like the windows were going to bust. They were shaking so badly. It destroyed 7 outlying buildings of a nearby farm. When a woman tried to call 911, she couldn't get through because the lines were all overwhelmed by people trying to react to this disaster." So just think what that does in the middle of the night if that happens. Now this is going back a little further. We started collecting this information in May when we heard about this. So I'll go over these a little more briefly. This is April 29th in Lafayette Township, Pennsylvania. considerable amount of gas and crude oil blew out of a pipeline when a valve broke in Lafayette Township on Saturday afternoon. We just had a valve blow out up near the Onondaga Nation, the Tennessee gas pipeline up at the north here. There's a compressor station just to the east of the nation in Lafayette, New York. Last Tuesday night, a pressure relief valve blew, and gas blew out of that pipeline for over half an hour. 7 fire companies were called. I talked to people from a couple of those. They were brought to the property and then told, it's not safe for you to go in there. And they had to wait for people from the company to come who knew how to turn the valves off on either side of this and control it. Luckily, it did not ignite. But that's the kind of thing that goes on all the time, unfortunately, around pipelines, valves and compressors. So this is the one in Lafayette, Pennsylvania. A great deal of gas blew out for about 3 hours. Had to close off the road. Then in May, in another township in Pennsylvania, Brooklyn Township, the compressor station exploded. According to the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania, has not the best track record overall on some of this. They said that the bulging walls, remember that picture of that big compressor station we saw inside, that the walls were bulging out, and that a sensor in the compressor building detected a fire in the 4,000-pound compressor. It's the second fire at a Williams compressor station in the county in 14 months. They restarted the compressor 24 hours later despite being told not to. Then there's this one in June. This is just since May. This is in Pennsylvania, or in Louisiana, so nearly a 300-foot crater leveled by gas exploding in a pipeline. You can see this is pretty hard steel here, and what happens when one of these things goes wrong? Shook the residents out of their beds. It made it look as though a bomb had gone off. An 80-foot section of pipe was blown away, creating a large crater. When they happen in rural areas without a lot of people, the damage is much less. The problem with this pipeline is that it's going to run through residential neighborhoods, as we've seen. So that's just generally pipelines around the country in the last 4, 5, 6 months. Millennium built this southern pipeline that goes east and west in 2007 and 2008. Within 3 years, joke the Indians had it. So 3 years, by January of 2011 it was leaking. 3 years. Now some of these pipelines, I remember when they put this, I grew up in northern Oswego County, I remember when they put the first gas pipeline through in the 50s and we'd stopped running coal, and so that thing is almost as old as I am. So this one's 3 years old. And yet a gas leak was detected when they flew over and saw the bubble coming out of a creek. 1,300,000 cubic feet of gas exploded. And unfortunately what they found was that this well that was bad, the Public Service Commission inspected it and found that the well, it had a defective weld called a double joint weld, which refers to a mechanized weld that is made in a staging yard prior to shipping the pipe to the final installation site. And records showed that this section did not pass that inspection, and many other sections did not pass, and yet other welds with similar defects may also develop leak were put into the pipeline. That's what's already in the ground from this company, and they want you to trust it. Now, who looks at these things after they're built? That's the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, the guy that said, I won't live near one. And this is the head of it last June, being quoted as saying that his regulatory process is kind of dying. They have very few tools to work with. do I think that this is him saying, do I think I can hurt a major international corporation with a $2 million civil penalty? No. So what's the answer? They've created a YouTube video to urge the industry to be more safe. So that takes care of that one. Here's another pipeline rupture this is crude going through a pipeline in Arkansas. This is Exxon, and they were issued a notice of probable violation. And what it said in that notice was that in the years leading up to the rupture, Exxon delayed a crucial inspection, put off urgent repairs, masked pipeline threats with skewed risk data, and overlooked its own evidence that the pipeline was prone to seam failures. And so they get fined. They got fined $2.7 million, the exact amount that the guy said would be totally ineffective against a large corporation that makes billions and billions of dollars a year. And so they just cut these corners because the fines are easier for them to deal with and cheaper than doing it correctly. So where's this gas going? In one letter, the company has claimed that it will benefit more rural customers in New York. Well, that's not true. If you look at FERC's own documents, there's a Q&A section that says, will I be able to use gas from this pipeline near my house? And the answer from FERC is no, the pressure in these lines is much too great for domestic use. So they're shipping a rather raw product through these pipelines. It's at a very high pressure. It has to be depressurized many times before it can be put in a house. It hasn't been odorized. It's not ready for domestic use, and that's what FERC tells us. So if they come to your town and say, this is really going to benefit people here, that's not true. Where will it go? It will be shipped either to the east or the west. If it goes to the east, there's a terminal in Everett, Massachusetts that's owned by a French company that has an application pending to export gas from that terminal. One of the three companies that owns Millennium is National Grid, which is a British corporation, and its international business model is importing gas into Europe and England, where they can sell it for 5 and 6 times as much. So if it goes east, that's what they intend to do with it, export. They can't make money selling methane in the United States these days. They've overproduced so much that the price is so low that they do not make profit in the domestic market, and that's why the export is going to be what we're going to see happening more and more and more. If they ship it to the west, they get it to Niagara Falls, where they hook up with the Trans-Canada pipeline, where they get to use gas, and you need frack gas in order to exploit the tar sands. You need all that heat to melt the bitumen. And so that's these slides. And this is just a slide that shows that the Energy Administration is now on its 3rd approval of exports. And what they do is they liquefy the gas, put it in huge ships, and ship it to Europe and Asia, where they can sell it for much more. It's not about energy independence, it's about corporate profits. And this is just telling us that approval opens the dam. It was the first one. And this talks about using shale gas for tar sands extraction. So that's most of the details that I wanted to go over with you tonight. But then I always try to wrap up with just a few thoughts about where we are and what our children and grandchildren will have to look for if we don't change our fossil fuel habit. We're at a crossroads in New York. If the earth is already heated up to a degree. I just saw another alarming article about this afternoon. We are heating the atmosphere at a rate that is incredibly dangerous. And by switching from one fossil fuel to another, we're actually not doing anything to improve the climate change situation. And in fact, because methane is 105 times worse for climate change over a 20-year period, and so much methane is leaked in the fracking process, in the compressing process, in moving it, in cities, it actually turns out that scientists at Cornell have proven that using frack gas, even though it burns cleaner at ignition, is actually worse for climate change than using either oil or coal. So we are not moving to a greener fuel here. You'll hear that all the time. You hear it on the radio all the time. That's not true under the science. And so what we have to do is we've been telling the governor this, you have to make New York the leader in alternative energy. This is a small vertical access wind turbine. It will generate at 3 miles an hour wind. This one's about 6 feet by 8 feet. We're looking at one of these slightly larger than that for our home. You don't need to put it way up in the air on a big tower like the big wind that we're so familiar with. And that's really what we have to start doing. We have to do a lot of decentralization. This is my basement. Most of my house is cluttered because I don't have time to clean it up. This is a geothermal heating unit. It takes, we drill 2 holes about 350 feet in the ground. You have a closed loop that takes liquid down there, takes that temperature back up. It's about a constant 51 degrees. And somehow kind of a reverse of refrigeration. They take the heat off in that, and that's how we heat this section of our home. These are radiant heat pipes that go underneath the floor, and then after this, the heat exchanger also runs a hot air backup system for it. No fossil fuels involved in that. It both heats and cools. It's very efficient, very good unit. It can be done. It doesn't run on fossil fuel. It does use electricity, and that's why we're working to generate our own electricity. We know that solar power is clean. Germany is the leader in solar power. They get less sun than we do. This is the kind of thing that we should be doing rather than spending billions of dollars on infrastructure that will only tie us to the fossil fuel habit. So I think you get my position, and that's the information that you can reach me at. We'll take questions and answers. We'll take questions and try to answer them when Greg is finished. So thank you for listening.
All right, thanks to Joe. So next, Craig Stevens is going to speak. Craig Stevens is a 5th-generation New Yorker from Oswego, a 6th-generation landowner in Silver Lake Township, Pennsylvania. Craig was born and raised in California and grew up at the beach, becoming a champion swimmer and water polo player. He moved to Virginia when his father became ill in 2006. And after he died, he bought his 6th-generation home in Silver Lake Township near Montrose. Craig began his study of the oil and gas industry when he found a 10-year lease had been forced on his property without his permission. He also had the 33-mile pipeline from New York to Pennsylvania planned to go across his property. With the ensuing local seismic testing, he became aware of the problems in Dimmock, about 15 miles away, and while looking into them, he found that almost all of his local community had turned their back on them. Craig has spent the last 2 years submitting right-to-know requests to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for information that should be freely available to a tax-paying citizen in Pennsylvania. These requests have provided a chilling story of avoidance and ignorance from our regulatory and elected officials regarding contamination of the Commonwealth. Craig is here today to discuss what he has observed and personally experienced since the oil and gas industry has come into his community and separate the facts from the fiction for you. So here's Craig.
Thank you, Isaac. Good evening, everybody. Good to have you here. The intro that Isaac gave, I always bring that. That's the progression of my ownership of the property I'm on. There's a lot of information out there saying that I somehow stole the property from my grandmother, so if anybody got a question, I've got the deed and all the corresponding documentation. Because that's all that the industry has when you question them. I'm a conservative, a constitutional conservative. I'm not a left-wing anti-drilling activist, nor am I a really right-wing or Republican person. So I really don't have anything to do with politics with this, because as far as I'm concerned, it's a simple property rights and ownership issue. What I'm playing up there, and I'll talk on them, but I'll just let them go so you guys can see it in the background, is my property when the pipeline comes to town. As Isaac said, I moved to Virginia in 2006. My dad got sick, he was living in our ancestral home. And then after he passed away, my brother and sister and I bought my ancestral farmhouse from the rest of my family, and I moved there in January 2010. Found a lease on my property that I didn't know about, that's here also. That was already on my property, I didn't have any knowledge of it. But I also found stakes going across my property, 2,400 feet across my 115-acre rectangle I have in Silver Lake Township. And when I asked my neighbor about it, they said, oh, that's where the pipeline's gonna go through. I said, really? I didn't hear anything about it. Oh, you didn't hear anything about it? Well, they're in town, go down and talk to them. So I did. That was Laser Midstream. It's now owned by Williams, so Williams pretty much ends up looking like owning all the pipelines in the United States. They're one of the largest pipeline installers in the country. So I went down to meet with them because I found out my aunt, who owns a third, my uncle owns a third of our property, had already signed, and they actually got my grandmother portion, her life tenancy signed, but she couldn't sign it because she was dying in a nursing home, so they got her sister to sign for her, younger sister, Lois, as her power of attorney. I didn't know why they needed to push it that hard and be going to the nursing home to find my grandmother when the pipeline was not installed for another year and a half later, but that's how they work. Everything's rush, rush, rush. I learned early in life, I'm 53, rushing to make decisions is usually a bad decision. So take your time on anything that we're talking to you about here, because they always want you to go, go, go. My dad called them used car salesmen on steroids. Doesn't matter whether they're a landman for the pipeline, I experienced that, or the landman for the drilling. For some reason, it just has to happen today. Although my lease that my grandmother signed was in 2007 for gas drilling, I had to fix my portion of it because they refused to acknowledge me as an owner. That was done in 2010, but it's now coming up on 2014. They haven't drilled anywhere near my property, anywhere in our neighborhood. So that big rush to get everybody to sign was ridiculous. So I go to the office for Laser, it's in Montrose, that's the county seat, 8 miles south of my house. I live about 8 miles south of the New York state line, right below Binghamton and Vestal. And there's 4 big guys there. They were very polite, from Louisiana. They said y'all a lot, so I knew they weren't locals. And I asked them about what was happening. They said, we're glad you're here. We need your brother and sister and your signature so we can get this pipeline installed, so we can get the gas to market from the area, make you guys some money. I said, okay, I'm a businessman, so let's talk about what you had to offer. And they said, we're giving $5 a foot on a lifetime easement. I literally looked behind me to see if they were like this candid camera, like there's a hidden camera. Am I supposed to be laughing right now? They said, no, that's what all your neighbors signed for. I said, well, I'm not from here, boys. I'm from California, from the left coast. But so I said, really, that's interesting, because I talked to all my neighbors last night, both directions, and 5 miles to the west of me, nobody had signed with you at all. So telling me that I'm one of the only people holding this up and that all the neighbors have already signed, we call those a lie around here. I don't know what they call it in Louisiana. But they didn't like my questioning. I actually had a card with me I pulled out and gave to them that had all the names of the people I called and their phone numbers that said they hadn't signed an agreement. They don't like that either. Don't challenge the people because they're not very happy with you. So then these big giant guys, are about 6'4" each, crossed their arms and at the same time and said, that's okay, you don't have to sign. The state is going to give us certificate of public convenience. Because they want us here. I said, do you mean eminent domain? We prefer to call it certificate of public convenience. So remember that when it sounds like they're trying to steal from you, they just change the name to make it sound like a kinder, gentler taking. So I recapped. I said, when we recap our conversation, you're given nothing and you want a lifetime easement. That's not happening. You lied to me about my neighbors signing. I'm proving that with the information that I found out last night. And I don't like to do business with liars. And now you're telling me you're going to use the state to steal my property to put the pipeline across. I said, I'm not getting the negotiation part here where we're talking. Sounds like you're going to do this anyway, whether I like it or not. So they had to hold 2 Public Utility Commission hearings in our area. And they did that. It's probably done a few months later. I refused to sign I left. I told the guys I don't do business where I'm forced to do something. So they were at $5 a foot. They called me a month later and said they raised it to $15 a foot. But it was still a lifetime easement, and I wasn't interested. I have 4 kids. They'll be the 7th generation owners of the property. My aunt and uncle have kids. I mean, signing something today that gives your property away for the rest of their lives too, and their generations after that, that's ridiculous. Don't do it. I mean, don't give your property away to somebody forever, because forever is a long time. And so when they called, it was still a lifetime easement. I said, no, thank you, and I hung up. Then I went to the Public Utility Commission meetings. They were crowded. There was hundreds of people at these. They did 2, one in the afternoon and one in the evening. I was allowed to speak at one, so I spoke to the one closer to my house. And I had the CEOs of the companies, the 2 pipeline companies that were merging, sitting right in front of me. Basically, I asked them, just like I'm right in front of it now, I said, hey, so you're going to take our land by eminent domain. That's what you want to do with this hearing. That's what you're asking for. What are you going to provide us? Because the 5th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says if you want to take anything from somebody, there's just compensation. There has to be public benefit, especially if they're going to take property. And I said, I have heating oil at my house. It's been the heating medium for my house since they took the coal-fired furnace out from the basement. I actually have a coal chute at the house. It's kind of interesting. So I asked them, they took part of my property before and put power lines across it. And they also have cable wires where they brought them along the telephone poles, which were also taken. That's property right across front of my house. Is telephone poles, just like at your house too. They had to take those. They don't have to ask permission because it's a public utility. But we get a benefit from it. The benefit is, and I told them, I have this magic switch on my wall. When I flip it, the light comes on because I'm attached to a wire where they took my property to put wires in and give everybody an opportunity to buy electricity at a utility rate. Same thing with your cable line, same thing with your telephone. I have a magic box and I go like this and there's a dial tone and I can call anywhere in the world with it. So I asked them, are you going to, since you want to take the land, are you going to provide us with an opportunity to hook up to the natural gas? I mean, obviously that would not meet the takings clause. And the judge, the Superior Court judge in Pennsylvania, about 6 months later, found the same thing. Does not meet the requirement. You're going to take their land, but you're not going to provide them any benefit, no local benefit. So that's the issue. We're talking about FERC here. We didn't have FERC. We had a local company that was in Pennsylvania and New York, but they weren't a federal line. This is a little different with FERC. I find FERC kind of interesting. If you go on the FERC website and look up import-export terminals, you'll find that. There's 33 dots on that in North America. 22 in the United States alone. 4 have been approved. It means there's 18 more waiting for approval in the United States. Now let me tell you, when you challenge them like I did at the LNG hearing, there's a Long Island press with me on the front, my kids. We went to Long Island. Why? Because they want to put an LNG import facility there. They said it was an import. I went to challenge them because there's no such thing as import. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. Just read their own documents. This is from FERC. A company asked for, called the Neptune LNG Deepwater Port in Gloucester, Mass. They asked, a year and a half ago, they wanted to suspend their license for their import terminal. And the reasons they gave were that there's no such thing as imported natural gas. The price is so low, and we've created so much in the northeastern United States that they wanted to shut it down for 5 years because they couldn't make any money. 200 miles away, they want to put in the Liberty Terminal. So what? Who's kidding who here, folks? The price of natural gas here is so low, why would you liquefy it and bring it over on a ship, then unliquefy it to use it? They're lying to us. Just like Joe told you. America's fuel, laugh when somebody says that to you. Laugh heartily, because it's a joke. Here's why. That's called the foreign flurry. Norway, India, Japan, Russia, China. They're the biggest investors in oil and gas in the United States, from everything from LNG terminals for filling up vehicles, CNG, everything. China is the biggest one. They're putting in CNG stations all over the United States. But what's interesting is when you own a company, like a pipeline company, you need to get the gas to market and you want to get it to the highest bidder. Right now it's what? I didn't check today, but it's somewhere around $3.60 a thousand at the wellhead, natural gas is. Japan and Russia will pay $16 a thousand liquefied today for it. They want it. They're energy hungry in China. They want our energy. So does Japan since the Fukushima disaster. So my problem is, if you're a shareholder, do you want them to sell it for $3.50 a thousand? Or do you want them to sell it to somebody for $16 a thousand? Here's your problem. You're a landowner. You've got property. You're allowed to do with that property. You should be able to do whatever you want to. Not if FERC gives them eminent domain, no. You saw Joe show the explosions. Do you know with FERC, eminent domain, and we're class 1 rural here, they can put that pipeline right under the foundation of your house if that's the best, straightest line. There is no setback on a class 1 rural. 24-inch high pressure line. You saw what it looked like when one blows. That's a metal pipeline. And that can go right underneath your church, right underneath your house, right underneath the schoolyard, because FERC gives them eminent domain. You can't stop them from doing it. I don't like the federal government telling me what to do. I don't know about you guys. There's Williams' own document about the Constitution pipeline. They told us at the meetings, we filmed the guy, are you going to use eminent domain? No comment. And then, is it going to be exported? We're only responsible, he said, and I'm using the Constitution pipeline as an example, we're only responsible for getting it from point A to point B, which was from Pennsylvania to Albany. Okay, what happens after that? We don't know where it goes from there. Okay, well, I went on your website, I told them last night, and printed this from the Williams website. The key points of putting this pipeline in are power generation, industrial petrochemical, LDCs, and LNG exports. After they'll look you in the face and you film them saying they don't know where the gas is going. So they're not involved in that part. But their own website talks about why they want to put it in, to export liquefied natural gas. So, I'm showing these pretty pictures because that's my property. How did the pipeline end up going across my property? Well, they eventually came to their senses about the lifetime easement. They made it a 40-year easement, not a lifetime easement. I don't have the only choice. I'm a 1/9 owner of my property, along with my brother and sister. My aunt and uncle own a larger 1/3 each. So we can't stop, you can't stop a family member in Pennsylvania from doing something on the property. But what I can do is make sure that we weren't being ripped off. So I couldn't stop it, but we did. Just to let you know what these numbers become, it went from $5 a foot to 15 to 115. Got it? So they strong-armed me so hard at $5. They just had to have a sign at $5. So what that tells you is you're doing business with people that it's not about the money to them. It's just about getting you to give up your property for the cheapest amount possible. And I will tell you, I've heard the stories. They go back to the boardroom and they laugh. They can't believe people are actually stupid enough to give up their property to them for the money that they did. The leasing was one thing with $5, $25, $50 an acre. We all know that. You've got plenty of people here, thousands in New York that sign for $3 an acre, right? Same thing in Pennsylvania. Then they laugh about it. And you're thinking, okay, but when you get them, like some people did for $6,000 an acre a few years ago, they act like, that's big money. Well, it just makes up for all the neighbors of mine you ripped off. That's the key. Now they'll tell you flat out that they're not going to damage your property or the wetlands or anything. Ha ha ha. That's the creek in my backyard called Laurel Lake Creek. That doesn't look too clean to you, does it? On July 29th of 2011, when they were boring under my neighbor's property on a hill, down underneath the creek and back up onto a hill, my neighbor next door to me, two different neighbors, they had a blowout. How do we know? Because in the morning of July 29th, my trout stream was crystal clear. Because my kids throw breadcrumbs into it, and the fish eat it, and they like to see it because like piranhas attacking, they enjoy it. So then we went into town, came back in the afternoon, and they went out to throw breadcrumbs in, and the creek was not crystal clear, it looked like the Mississippi. So we went down the street where you just saw the sandbags. We went down and we asked them what was going on, and they were scurrying around with trucks driving around, big vacuum trucks sucking up all this mud. They said, we had a blowout, but we'll take care of it, don't worry about it. I'm like, well, I'm already worried because my creek in my backyard looks like the old Miss. So I went home and dialed the DEP number, emergency number, and I reported it. I wanted to make sure it had been reported because it was brand new. It just happened a few hours earlier. They had not heard about it, the lady I talked to. And I said, I want to report a blowout in the creek. And she said, Mr. Stevens, we don't call that a blowout. We call it an inadvertent return to surface. You look at the phone, it's one of those where you look at the phone and go, what in the? So I said, well, I'm going to have an involuntary muscle reaction down there if somebody doesn't get down here and figure out how to clean it up. Now, let me tell you, you'll see straw bales in there. There they are. They all washed out when the flood came. That was their answer. Their answer was to throw a bunch of straw bales in to try to slow the mud down. I'm not kidding you. And then when it got slow enough, now there's the creek. The original hole on July 29th was a 10-foot diameter bottom of the creek, blew right out, right next to a township road on a bridge. I mean, literally, it just blew a hole right in the creek. And then all the mud, because they're drilling from up here, filling it full of mud, the drilling mud, they're about 40 feet deep, go underneath 40 feet, and they're pushing back up the other way, so the pressure builds up. All that mud from both sides just comes right back out the hole. Here's the sad news. My neighbor, John Jones, didn't fare too well in this excitement, because while the trucks were driving down the road, one of them ran a stop sign, didn't make the turn, and he was sitting there in his Subaru. You'll see the big white truck laying over on top of a Subaru Legacy. That's my neighbor, John Jones III. And his daughter, notice the passenger door, and you'll be able to see it better. I can put it up on the screen in a minute, is open. She survived and was able to get out. Her dad became part of the vehicle and lived for another 5 minutes. That's what happens when trucks go zooming around your neighborhood, whether it's gas and oil. Who cares if they're doing the pads in? That's one thing where we get sand trucks and water trucks like you can't believe. This is pipeline installation. You know, we put these in all the time. We're experts. Boom, blowout. So not only did they blow out a 10-foot hole, but 3 days later, because it's bentonite clay that they use, and they'll say it's the same clay that when you go to a health spa that you get in. So I looked it up. I mean, they think we're stupid. Guys, come on. They think we're idiots. So you just Google bentonite clay for drilling, installing pipelines. You'll see 30 types of bentonite clay. Some are mixed with barium, some are mixed with aluminum, some are mixed with... So I don't want to hear bentonite clay, the same stuff. Will, yeah, come over here, I'll rub some on your face. So that's the key is... So the first day was 10-foot diameter hole, but it's clay. So the DEP lets them wait 3 days so they can try again. So what do? They go down and give them the bid, and on August 1st, boom, 20-foot diameter hole. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Same thing. Got in the creek, the whole deal. So then they let them wait another 3 days and try again. Boom, 30-foot hole. Fourth time, boom, about a 50-foot diameter hole. No kidding, I'm talking a creek bed with a hole in it, like a crater with mud just flowing out. So you saw with their sandbag and everything. And so we're wondering how 8 blowouts over the next 2.5 months to get this done. The last 3 though they controlled because they put rubber dams on the creek and diverted it around that section to get this done. Got it? They don't know how to do this. These guys are experts, right? If they knew what they were doing, they wouldn't be blowing creeks out. That's what one looks like. That is the drilling machine. That's the platform they're on. These are all my pictures. I was up. You know, they don't even like me going up on my own property. They had a right-of-way of 60 foot. I'm right on the edge of it, taking pictures and filming stuff. There's my 3-wheeler up on the property. They don't like it. You can't be here. I said, yeah, I can be here. Well, we don't want you to be here. Tough. I'm here watching my property. Do you have something better to do? No, I'm self-employed. I'm just going to stay here and watch you guys see how bad of a job you do on my property, like you did down at the creek by my house or behind my house. Southeastern Directional Drilling. They owned the truck that flipped over on John Jones. Would you like to know? The truck had 2 caged brakes, one faulty brake, and he didn't have a commercial driver's license, the driver. Uh-oh. So that's what you get too in your neighborhood. Bunch of guys driving 40-ton mud trucks that don't know what they're doing and driving equipment that's not good. So there's the creek in the backyard. You can see that's nice and clean. It's just full of mud, and that drilling mud is still at the bottom of my creek. Nobody's ever cleaned it up before. There's the hay bales. That's the straw bales. That's their fix. I'm showing this because people, you don't have to believe a word I'm saying, but that's what it ends up doing. Now, would you like to know they have to agree with the DEP? They have to put erosion and sediment. They're not allowed to get anything in there. There's when it was the largest blowout going. And so these guys are basically standing around trying to suck it up. They don't tell you the truth. Here's my easement. Anybody wants to see it? There's paragraphs in there about how they're supposed to avoid getting that kind of contamination in there. Joe talked about the list of pipeline accidents in the United States. They're right there. Hundreds. In just the last 13 years, there's been over 340 states of explosions and fires. And then there's my emergency management plan for Susquehanna County. It directly mentions pipelines, explosions, and hazards in it. They know all about it. The firefighters are the guys that have to put their lives on the line. So the problem I have with this whole process is not that I'm against anything. I'm really for two things. I'm for you and you're in my private property rights. And then I'm for them telling you the truth up front. Just ask them if they come to your door, you're going to steal my land by gunpoint using the federal government? How fast can you run to the driveway and get off my property? Because that's really what they're there to do. They'll talk nice, they'll say nice things. The company, they'll come in and buy off the local charities. That's what they like to do too. That's what they do. Is they'll invest money into giving it away. I'll give you an example what you're going to get. We got to negotiate because they weren't given eminent domain. Constitution Pipeline, that's a 122-mile line that has $750,000 been put in an account for the landowners. If you divide $750,000 into 122 miles by the foot, it's $3 a foot. That's what they're going to pay them when they get eminent domain if the Constitution Pipeline is allowed. You don't have a choice. They'll pay you for the trees. You know what they do with my trees? Let them lay there and rot. They don't use them. The value of your timber is destroyed. I'm going to end with a couple things. One is, in watching them do the pipeline installation, I was reminded immediately of Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So they got the same result 8 times in a row until they cheated and dammed the whole creek up. It was kind of a cheat. But I've got a couple one here that Arun Gandhi lives in Rochester, New York. He's now a friend of mine. That's Gandhi's grandson. His grandfather said, "Earth provides enough for every man's need, but not every man's greed." Why do I say that? Because you, the landowner, are going to get a couple bucks a foot and some money for your timber. The pipeline company is going to make billions of dollars sending gas through that, and the landowner, you, are going to see none of it. Not a penny of that. They don't share that part of the money. And then I'll end with this. Martin Luther King. It's a good one. On some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? Ask yourself that. Can they come and steal your property, put a hazardous pipeline that can blow up at any minute? Don't believe me, just Google it and find out how many have. And give you nothing for it, and then make billions and call it good for the country when they send it overseas to give the gas to Russia or China or the highest bidder. By the way, all of our gas prices go up when we're competing with China too. So I will tell you, what they're trying to do is pull the wool over your eyes again. If you thought the leasing of the land for fracking was fun, wait till you see what these guys do when they want your property to put a pipeline. My idea is just say no. If they're going to force it, and like Joe says, make them go to eminent domain, you have a much better position to fight it. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you, Craig. So we're going to get this table set up and we're going to go right over to some Q&A. Yeah. time, and we'll try to get through as many as we can until I get too sleepy or people lose interest. So does anyone have any questions for Craig and Joe? So 1, 2, 3, and we'll take those for now. So sir?
Yeah, good presentation, but what I'm kind of confused about is, I mean, there's probably tens of thousands of miles of natural gas pipelines throughout New York State. They've been drilling for gas since 1821. The first well was out in Fredonia. I don't understand why a meeting like this was conducted 10 or 15 years ago or even longer ago about the threats to the landowners' rights. Now in New York, the difference between, I believe, New York and what you've experienced in Pennsylvania is you guys were all individuals. Here in New York, we've got landowner gas coalitions. We've got lawyers that we retain. We know all about the landmen, we know all about the gas companies. They're no different than any other major corporation on this planet. Oil company, gas company, telephone company, they're all the same. But what you gotta have is you gotta join the land, I'm just speaking to people here that are from New York State, join the landowner coalition, join like the Joint Landowner Coalition in New York. We have local coalitions here. They've got one in Padua County. They retain excellent lawyers. They will protect us from the landmen.
All right, so do you have a question?
Well, my basic question is, why didn't they do anything in Pennsylvania in that regard? Why didn't you organize?
Okay, so that's a viable question. So why didn't we organize in Pennsylvania? Is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Craig says he's
Okay,
a
right.
constitutional, conservative guy. You know, there's power in numbers.
Sure.
Why did you guys say all those individuals
So,
not form
well,
coalitions?
The problem I have is when you say you guys, I didn't have a choice. When I moved there was already a lease on my deed that had nothing to do with me on my property that I owned at the time they did it.
That's
so-
an unusual situation.
Unusual, but I will tell you that's not that unusual where I am. Many times they went after the life tenant and signed them and illegally recorded it. I'm hearing from people that that's what happened with their elderly parents or grandparents. But I agree with you. There's strength in numbers, but the strength is, why would you form a coalition? There's my problem. When people, most of the New York Landowners Coalition group is landowners, so that's great. But their promotion is moving this forward. Okay, got it. But if you're grouping together to protect yourself from somebody, that means you don't trust them in the first place. So why would I want to do business with anybody that's not up front with you in the first place? Why would you want to do business?
All right, so I think what we're going to do is move on and focus more on pipelines, because that's what brings us here tonight. So I'm going to move up front here.
I wanted to ask, what is the setback? Or is there any setback for this
Okay,
millennium?
So I'm just so people know, I'm repeating the questions because Joe here is very hard of hearing, so it helps us have a functioning Q&A. So the question is, what are the setbacks on pipelines?
There were almost none.
What about for this one, the millennium? Is there any setbacks? And what designation does it have? Under
So-
FERC, is it class 1, class 2? What is it?
Okay, so the
'Cause-
question, is it class 1, is it class 2? How is the pipeline classified, and are there any setbacks on the millennium specifically?
Well, there are many different agencies that regulate pipelines. FERC regulates interstate, where the gas is being moved from one state to the other. That's the federal regulation. Some of the gathering lines that are smaller in both size and pressure are regulated in the state by the Public Service Commission, and some of them are not regulated at all. So it varies between states. I know that Pennsylvania has a different set of classifications.
But I'm asking about the millennium in New York, the millennium that you're discussing right now.
Oh, this is the I-81.
I-81, what do you call it? I-81?
Yeah, this is the I-81 pipeline.
Okay, I-81, I'm asking specifically about that. What are the setbacks on that, and what is the classification?
Well,
As it's going through how many miles, 73 miles?
70 miles.
70 miles, what's the classification? And then what is the setbacks? Is there any?
It's not classified yet because their plan is, they haven't even put a plan out yet. What they said in May was, we are thinking of building this pipeline if we do, our current thinking is it would be 24-inch minimum, and it may be bigger. So that's all we know at this point. They have, when they move to a pre-filing, then they'll have to be more specific, then FERC will classify it, and we'll know much more about it.
Right, so right now, we're in the pre-filing stage, so this is not an official proposition yet. So that was supposed to drop.
You know what I was wondering about?
Hold on. Let me
Okay,
finish.
go finish, okay.
So we're not quite at the point where we have any type of official paperwork. When we do have that, we're going to have a much better idea of what we're looking at.
And then that gentleman who spoke about the old pipelines from what, the 1800s, what is the pressure of those pipelines? Are they much less pressure per square inch? Like you said, this pipeline will be 1,200 pounds per square inch. That's a high pressure line. Now, this gentleman is talking about old pipelines. What is the pressure of those pipelines? Does anybody know?
Since we don't know what pipeline he's talking about, it's very hard to answer that. One of the things that we have seen, so the problem here, the problem is they have all this gas coming out of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and very few markets. And so they have to get it somewhere else. There aren't enough pipelines for them to move it to make enough profit. So they keep trying to increase the capacity of the current pipelines. They do that by adding compressors and increasing the pressure on old pipelines, making them more risky. And that's what we're seeing. There are a lot of compressor applications currently pending in New York State so that they can get more gas into them and move it faster and riskier. That's what we know at this point. And what we're seeing in New York is that even though we're not getting fracked, we're getting attacked by the infrastructure, we're beginning to call it. A pipeline here, a pipeline in Madison County, the unconstitutional pipeline, one to the west of us, storage in Watkins Glen, storage in Preble, New York, my hometown, compressors here, all of this stuff coming at us, whether we get any benefit from it or not, and whether we get any say about it or not. In my town, they wanted to store 720,000 gallons of liquid propane under pressure above ground and didn't want to tell the town about it. They got a railroad grant from the state and never told the town about it. That's the way these projects come at us, and that's why we try to go around and give people as much information as we can.
Right. Okay, so I believe your name is Bob. We were chatting.
No, I've heard my answer already.
You've heard your answer. Okay, anyone else have questions? I see 1, 2. All right, do you want to start? Yeah.
This isn't so much a question as a comment. Is that we experienced a gas blowout here about 12 or 13 years ago over on Airport Road near the sports facility. And family house, in fact, I went to high school with them, blew up. Unfortunately, the family wasn't home. But it's right off Airport Road.
Yeah, right. So what she said is that there was a blowout here only 12 years ago or so, right on Airport Road.
Yeah.
So, yep.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but I don't understand how those blowouts happen. What's the mechanism for the blowout?
Okay, so the question is, what's the mechanism for the blowout?
That pipe had deteriorated and was not maintained.
No, the new pipe.
Okay.
Well, this is when they were installing it. So they're what they have to do, and the DEC requires this in New York. They can open a trench and put the pipeline in, but when you get near a wetland or a waterway, a creek, stream, river, they have to bore underneath. It's required in the DEC. They had an option in Pennsylvania and they chose to bore. And when you're drilling, you're putting a drill bit down and putting a lot of pressure down there to make sure that the drill bit gets down. You've got mud, and then when the pressure builds up, it finds a way out. So the way it found out was the creek bed. And that not only happened there, but it happened up on my private property too. There was issues with what they were doing. So it just looks like the system of installation is fairly flawed. They don't care. I mean, I will tell you that they've never fixed it. The DEP fined, the Fish and Boat Commission fined the company that did the damage on my property $20,000. They put 5 criminal complaints against them. So I said, great, and then I called DEP, and they also did a complaint and collected fines from them. So I called both the agencies and said, awesome, you found them guilty of contaminating my property. When are they gonna come and clean it up? And they said, I'm sorry, we can't. We already settled with them. Both agencies that I pay taxes to settled with them. They said, get a lawyer. Wait, you guys gave them the ability to install this. You gave them the permission to do it across my property, right? The state has to allow it. Then they broke your laws and you fined them and collected money. Why do I have to get a lawyer? Make them fix it. To this date, that was installed in 2011. We're 2 years later. There's no fix. I still have all the damage up there still. So there's the problem. And you want to get a lawyer, that's fine, but the lawyers don't want to fight it either. So it's kind of an interesting catch-22.
All right, so I see one. I want to hold off because you've had a couple of questions. Okay, I'll come back to you. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So speak up if you can, okay?
I just wanted to point out in response to the last question about what causes problems with pipelines, there's some information in this pamphlet. For example, the San Bruno explosion was caused by faulty welds, and we know that there were faulty welds in the Millennium Pipeline, the one that exists already. And they were fine here.
So what she said is that there's information on the back table. I invite everyone to help themselves to it. Now, I've got a quick question before we move to you. Who here is a property owner with the Sun Oil pipeline? Who got our mailer, basically? So you, sir, anyone else? Okay, a couple of folks. All right. Now, you had a question?
Okay, I think there was a misunderstanding there. I think the Airport Road thing was a pipe explosion, which would be different than I believe than the blowout you're talking about.
Right.
And I'm just curious about the answer to the same question. Is it the improper weld?
Right.
Is it a pipe that has rusted? What other mechanisms can
Yes.
open a pipe?
So this question is, by what mechanism do these things explode?
Yeah.
We know that they go along the route afterwards with a sniffer, like equipment. Also, you can see the vegetation will die if there's methane leaking. The welds, it's a whole other thing. When you watch them install them, you saw the pictures Joe had.
Yeah.
I mean, these are 30-inch diameter pipes that they're welding, and then they're shoving in the ground and bending at angles. It's no imagination, mystery that there might be a pinhole for gas. For a gas, it only takes a pinhole. It comes out, and you can have problems. What mostly happens with the explosions is people hit them with backhoes, or they're working on property where they'll have, at my property, they have these yellow things all down showing pipeline is here, pipeline is here. I saw a recent safety video that the guys were tiling their field, the farm owners, and they stayed 75 feet from where those yellow markers were, and they still busted it open. Luckily, it did not explode, because normally the spark from knocking the pipe open, it's steel pipe, sparks and kaboom goes the farmer and everybody else.
Well, and further evidence of that is in New York, you see these things that you're supposed to call before you dig. When you call, they don't know where the pipelines are. The easement that I have been looking at this week, I've read it. There is no location of the easement in the physical description that was given away. So I said, well, can you send me your survey? And the survey says probable route of the pipeline. So particularly when these things are built before, let's say more than 40 years ago, there was no regulation, no record keeping, and they don't know where these pipelines are. So yes, a lot of them are caused by external damage. They're also caused because they cut corners. The welds aren't good, or there's external corrosion that eats into the pipe from the outside. They cannot monitor for that. They like to brag, oh, we have these smart pigs, which are computerized things, they send down pipes, and you can learn something about the inside of a pipe from that. But we've seen several pipeline explosions that they now have concluded were caused by external corrosion, and that's what happens. We have this old infrastructure, we're overusing it. It's just like the trains, the tracks are used up. If you run the train too fast around the corner, it goes off the rail. When you put too much pressure on an old pipeline, it's gonna fail. And that's what we're seeing around the country, almost one week, major pipeline disaster.
Very quickly, the gas is not dry all the way. There is a percentage of moisture in it. That moisture is saline. Growing up in Southern California at the beach, you mix saline and metal, and the interior of that pipe over time is going to break down, and the exterior too. So my problem is, how long do we think these are going to last, and when do they become non-dangerous? You know what they do? They don't fix them, they don't take them out, they just abandon them. That's what they do, and that's the problem with me.
And I actually had one more question for the landowners too. Have either of you gentlemen been approached by the landmen at this point?
No.
Not yet? Okay. Just curious. And I don't think that makes sense because they're not at that part. They're not at they have not yet pre-filed yet. So that does that up. We're just curious. And part of the thing is this whole effort has been really organized in the dark without a real sense of timeline. And so at any day they could pre-file, we're just not really sure. So I had two hands up and I forgot who they were. 1 and 2. So do you want to go?
Yeah, Craig, I thought I understood that you were saying that the pipeline on your property was not taken through eminent domain because it did not meet the criteria for eminent domain. And I'm wondering about this pipeline, and would the potential be there for it to be yes, they can take it through eminent domain, or it would not be able to?
All right, so I'll just repeat that for everyone's benefit and also these guys. So the question is, Craig's pipeline was not taken by eminent domain. Will this pipeline be taken by eminent domain? Is that a possibility? And I'll hand that off to Joe.
The company, Millennium, will not get the right for eminent domain until FERC analyzes their application and issues a certificate of public need. It's called a little different when it's a state level. So they have to provide a certain amount of information to FERC before they can get the permission to use eminent domain. So when they first come to your door, they don't have that right in their back pocket yet. It's almost inevitable given the percentages. These companies know how to make these applications, and FERC has a 99% approval rate. But at first, if they're coming to your door, they will not have that power. They're calculating that they will get the power, and eventually, if they find that there's a public need, they will issue that certificate, and then they have the right of eminent domain.
So I think as a good general statement, they like to avoid eminent domain because it doesn't look good, and that's one way to make people real angry real quick. But I mean, at the end of the day, I would venture to say we're not totally positive. They generally like to avoid it. So before I come to you, I had one other question and I forgot it. So go ahead.
Joe mentioned that there were state protected wetlands near Tully, and I was wondering if, well, you also said the state has very little control over, the pipeline, so can they protect that at all, or will they reroute the pipeline?
All right, so her question is, will they reroute the pipeline around the state protected wetlands up in Tully?
That's certainly one of the possibilities. And the state, actually, people have checked with both the Syracuse and Cortland office of the DEC to see what they know about this pipeline, and they know zero. What we've seen over at the unconstitutional is that they've changed that route 7 times. So yes, they can, that's what I said before, they look it up, it looks good on a map somewhere else, they don't know whether it's going underneath a trailer park or through a wetland or between 2 glacial lakes. And the problem is, as they get further north in the Tully Valley, it's a very narrow, dry Finger Lake Valley with very little room for maneuvering around some of the problems that they've already caused. There was a century of salt mining there that's caused huge environmental damage. That's what those mud boils are. So there's only so far you have to play here in that narrow area. But yes, the state can tell them you can't go underneath that that wet lane, you'll have to move it somewhere else. That can happen. And so when they're telling you, when they come to your door, this is the only route, and we're not willing to negotiate it, that's not the truth either. They change the route, partially if they get too much resistance, but mainly if there's an environmental issue. But DEC doesn't come in until much later on when the route is pretty much finalized, and then they tell them, this is where you have to go underneath that stream bed. That's what they did with the unconstitutional. They told them, you have to tunnel under every stream, and you can only do it in a very limited period of time during the year because otherwise it's too sensitive, and that is where things stand over there. It's going to slow it down, but it's not going to stop it.
So, I actually remembered what I wanted to say. So as a landowner, what you can do right now, and we have the forms on the back table, you can rescind permission for the pipeline company to come on your property. The form is on the back there. If you give it to one of us, we'll be happy to get that to the company. You want to mail it, certified mail, if you would like to do it yourself. This gentleman, Stan, he's got it in his hand right there. So if anyone is interested, talk to Stan or you'll find it right on the back table. So let's grab the next round of questions, if anyone has any. 1, 2.
I may have missed why eminent domain is the best thing the landowner can do to fight the pipeline. Why is that?
So the question is, why is eminent domain your best option as a landowner?
First of all, it protects you from liability. If you just sign voluntarily, you become, I don't know whether it's equally liable, but at least jointly liable for any damages done. So that's one advantage. Secondly, you will come out with a much larger financial reward or payment if you go to eminent domain, because they're not offering you under the formula that should be offered once you get to court. So you get, you are protected from liability if you don't sign. You'll get more money if you don't sign. You'll be able to negotiate and at least raise during the eminent domain process whether or not that path that they want to use is one that really works for you, or will they agree to move it. So you have a choice, you have more say about where it goes, and you have a say in how many pipelines they can put through there. You can limit it to the one that they want to build, rather than have it open-ended so that they can come back in and put 3 or 4 more. And you have some say as to what they can put through the pipeline. Only gas, not crude from a number of things that they'll tell you that are not negotiable at the beginning, that are in fact very negotiable when you go to eminent domain. But the main things that I would think about are liability and the amount of money, whether they're going to pay you a fair price or not. Because what they try to get you at the door, as Craig illustrated, is not a fair price.
Can I add on to that question? Is there a grand strategy then for using eminent domain to fight this pipeline at all?
Is there a grand strategy for using eminent domain to fight this pipeline? I don't know if grand strategy sounds really, really sinister, and I don't know if that's where we're going, but do any of you guys want to field that?
My grand strategy, as I did, was I just Googled what the founding fathers thought about eminent domain or the taking of property, and it's pretty clear that there was no supporting, and the guys that founded this country, for taking your property for any reason. Matter of fact, a couple of them said, yeah, come and try to take it, and I'll make sure that you'll be buried somewhere near it. But that's what the founding fathers thought. But as far as a legal perspective, Joe will do it. But my focus is, if you read the Constitution, they're not supposed to be able to take it, but that's not how it works. The federal government makes the rules.
Yes, we think it's better to say no and to make them work for this. And to make them treat you fairly, and they're not going to treat you fairly when they have you isolated. So we think it's much better for both the individual landowner and the communities to make them go through every step they have to, make them spend the money they need to, and make them pay what they should, and maybe they'll get the idea that we don't want their pipeline, and maybe they'll find another route. We don't know that yet, but we shouldn't just let them come through. If this is not for our communities, and it's not for the benefit of our homes, and we have to keep that in mind. It's so that they can sell this gas for more money somewhere else. So I don't know why we would cooperate with them, particularly when they're cheating us. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it go on day after day just to the east of us at the unconstitutional pipeline. That bums rush at 3 times as much as a very limited offer, instead of paying them up front what they should. The other thing that they can't do if they can't get on your property is they can't complete their FERC application. They have to have a survey when they go to FERC with the application. And they don't have a right to come on and survey your land. So there's a number of reasons why resisting at the beginning is advantageous both for the individual landowner and for all of us in the long run. If that's a strange strategy, I think so.
And let me give you a quick example. The laser line across my property, that was supposed to cost $65 million to put in. But 3 days before they started the process, ended up having to do a full environmental workup and wetlands and the whole thing. It ended up costing them $150 million. They didn't like that. It was more than double the initial estimate. But 3 days after gas started flowing through it, the company, Laser, sold it to Williams for $750 million. That's a 500% return on investment. So when they talked about being poor and having to pay all of us landowners, the people they needed to court to get it, they couldn't pay more than $5 a foot. It was like we were stealing the candy out of their baby's mouth. But when they completed it, they got to sell it to somebody else and make a huge profit. And that's before Williams takes it and makes billions of dollars sending the gas through. The person that gets taken advantage of always, no matter what you're looking at here, is the landowner, guaranteed.
And I think that that's, as part of a bigger strategy, I think we are encouraging people to challenge and wait. The issue right now that we're facing, and we really encourage people to be in touch with Joe, be in touch with us, that we're working on getting resources available. We're trying to find a lawyer who specializes in eminent domain, and that's been a challenge. But please keep in touch with us, and we're happy to keep lines of communication, and we're happy to take that angle. So I saw 1 and 2. Does anyone else have questions also? Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to ask, you said that 99% are approved. How many, has there been any pipelines not approved because of resistance or citizens resisting in the United States? Do you know of any?
All right, so her question is, have there been, so FERC approves 99% of pipelines. Have there been any that have not gone through because of citizen resistance? And I can speak to that really quick. And I would say the best example is the Constitution Pipeline. They've been very, very well organized. They went door to door and talked to every single landowner along the route. Neighbors talked to neighbors, and they've had to change the route of that pipeline, I think 3 times now. And so the more, the tougher you can make it, I think the better it is. And that's, locally, that's the biggest so-called success story that I know of. I'll hand it off to Craig here.
The Keystone XL northern portion has not been done. I was at a rally in DC, 50,000 people showed up. And the president, that's pretty much been a bane for him since the day he got into office, that they want to approve it. But the problem is, where do you think that oil is going? We're not going to use any of it. It's going straight from Canada to either Houston, Texas, or Louisiana. I talked to FERC when I got involved with Constitution, and the guy at FERC that was in charge of the project said they've done over 4,000 uses of eminent domain, and 1 time they didn't give it. I wasn't able to get an in-depth conversation as to what caused it, whether it was the company dropped the bid for it or they were fought and they won. But it doesn't look like you fight it very easily so far, but that doesn't mean you can't win it. So I don't know if Joe's got something on that too.
Well, if anybody had told us 5.5 years ago that they wouldn't be fracking in New York, I would have called them crazy. So I think what we've learned is that we have a lot more power than we thought we did. And the more we work together and share our information and help each other out and resist, the better the chances are for our children and our grandchildren that they're not going to have this kind of nonsense running through their backyards. Maybe I'm just an ornery guy, but I don't like Craig, I don't want people telling me what I can do with my land, what they can put right within a half a mile of my house that would blow up every one of my neighbors. I don't see that we have a choice. That's the way I see it. We have to make them know that we don't want this pipeline, and we're going to do everything we can to make it hard for them. And maybe 5 years from now, we'll be sitting here saying, we kept that pipeline out of the town of Maine and the town of Preble and the town of Lafayette. That's just the kind of fight I can't back away from.
They like to use the word partners, our landowning partners. When I talked to them, I said, look partnership up in the dictionary. We don't have partnership. If you want to find out our relationship, it's indentured servant or slave. When they take from you, you have no choice. That's a slave, that's a subject, it's not a citizen. So keep that in mind. And if you teach your kids that too, then they won't get taken advantage of. I mean, this is a generational thing. So what do they say? Freedom's only one generation away from extinction. So that's the key. Don't ever say we're defeated. I'm not a defeatist person. I've got people in the room that are my neighbors. They've tried to defeat us for many years now. Defeating has not worked. If they want to treat us with respect, they would ask permission to do something, not tell us. As soon as you start telling me what to do, that's when I dig my heels in, and it doesn't work very well for them. So I would agree, every step that Joe's telling you is a calculated thing, and just stand up for your rights. This is not about pipelines, natural gas, oil. It's about civil rights. That's exactly what this is. I made the mistake of thinking this was political 4 years ago when I moved here. Oh, we'll just solve it politically. It is never going to get solved politically. Not at all. They just ease the pain. They try to pass some things that make us feel good. How it will be solved is when you stand up for your right as a private property owner. And like I said, just Google the Founding Fathers on private property ownership. It's pretty amazing what they talked about 230 years ago. And for far less than what they're trying to do even with this pipeline and stealing your land, we threw England out of this country a long time ago. And now we're actually allies with them after throwing them out. So the key thing is stand together. The people along that line, they've got to get everybody in that line to say yes unless they give it a domain. Because they can't go around too much. But once they try to take it, then there are people, even this guy in Texas, he stood up against it. That's the Southern XL pipeline. And they still haven't put the pipeline across his portion of property because he brought in and used his rights. And this is a former military guy who just didn't want to be told what to do with his property after he went over and defended the country in Iraq. So there's the key. Find people that are like-minded, that want to, no matter whether you agree on anything else, whether I really own my property or somebody else does and can take it anytime they want, that's how you have to do it. And every community is going to have to stand up for it themselves.
Right, and I would just add one thing real quickly. At the end of the day, this is about finding common ground, and if we can find common ground on one particular thing and move ahead together, that's what we should do. So
the other thing I just want to say too is that citizens have not been resisting for a long time. This is something new from what I can see. Maybe I'm wrong, but the past 5 years is maybe citizens are resisting. So now this is something new. It's not like when the pipelines were going in 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that people were resisting or saying no.
Right.
We're saying no now, so this is a new phenomenon. So we may get results.
Right, and I think that that's a good point to bring up. Historically, there's been very little resistance to pipeline because going and giving a high pressure deal, sign today or you're going to lose money, it's effective and it works. And dividing people up and saying, saying, oh, your neighbor signed, it's an effective tactic. So go ahead.
The eminent domain thing really pisses me off.
It should.
I have to ask, because I'm a little confused, and I'm sorry to belabor it this way, but why, if there's no benefit that is perceived by the landowners, and that's a requirement for eminent domain, how how can they do that?
Okay, so I'll repeat that. The eminent domain factor pisses her off. So the question is, if there's no perceived benefit, how can they go ahead and do that? So I'm gonna hand this off to Crick.
So, and here's the fun part. So we challenged that with Constitution Pipeline with FERC, because they're at every meeting. And I got my little pocket Constitution out and showed them the Fifth Amendment. So that's why they call these import/export terminals. That's the problem. If they're importing it, it's critical infrastructure to get that gas from the port to the homes and the businesses. If they're exporting it, then stealing my property to put a pipeline on it to carry that gas overseas it's not defensible by them. That's why they use this whole bait and switch, where it's all for our good to bring in, and then you question, is it going to go out? And the guy that owns this one, the one I spoke about in Long Island, the CEO was there of the Neptune, and he said, or the Liberty, he said, oh no, you guys are nuts. I mean, he told a whole room of people, you're nuts if you think this is for export. It's import. And then we got the document showing that nobody's importing. So their job is to simply lie to you and tell you that there's no issue. So you don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. And you tell the federal government, I'm the boss, we're the boss, our community, and stay out. And that's what you have to start with. They might come in with the bulldozers and the people, but the difference is, at least you stood up against it, and you didn't just roll over and say, I guess we're already defeated because somebody said that they can take the property.
There's just some definition in the Natural Gas Act that declares that getting this gas to market is a public benefit, and it's presumed. We haven't studied that portion of the FERC regulations yet to understand whether or not there's any weakness there that we can push back on. But essentially, there have been decisions made in Washington. We know about the 2005 Energy Act and what it did in terms of removing most regulation from oil and gas exploration. They're the same kinds of laws that give these companies that right. And maybe that's something we can change as we go ahead, make that standard realistic. Because it doesn't do any community along this route any benefit to run this through their community. And yet, and we saw the recent Supreme Court decision in Rhode Island where that was not any kind of public benefit, that was gentrification, and they ruled that they could get eminent domain there. So we have a lot of work to do in order to educate our politicians and in order to change things in Washington. But there is a federal law that pretty much gives them the presumption that they have that right. I've made a note so that I can understand that better and hopefully answer the question better when it comes up. But it's bad federal law because of all the money that this industry spends lobbying and campaign contributions. It's the same reason we can't get any protection from Albany. We have politicians from this area that brag about not letting any control of fracking get through the Senate in this state. That's because they take hundreds of thousands of dollars from this industry. That money gets them that kind of result. That's the answer.
And I'll tell you, the easiest way to get these guys' attention is mess with their money. When I was negotiating with them because all I could do was negotiate. And my aunt and uncle signed for $5,000 total for their third portion of going across the property. I held out, so did my brother and sister. They got $95,000 each, my aunt and uncle did. Why? Because that's all I could do is negotiate, and I'm good at it. When they went to $15 a foot and still a lifetime easement, I went back a week later and said, I don't want any money. We don't need any of your money. What? Yeah, we just want a valve on the inside of our property line on both ends of the 2,400 feet. And I want 0.01 cents of every penny of the gas that goes through that. And the guy said, no, you've been making more than the CEO. I said, really? You don't understand the money that is involved that they're going to make by putting this across your property. And as I said earlier in my talk, you get nothing if you're the landowner. You get pennies compared to the millions they're going to make. My dad had a saying, it's like throwing nickels around like manhole covers, making a small thing seem much bigger.
That's what they do, is try to, like you're bleeding their last drop of blood out, you're asking for too much. And then they make billions and trillions and nobody knows about it. And all you get stuck with is this thing across your property that's very dangerous ultimately, and then just falls apart and they abandon it and leave it across there. And they still have that easement forever. They can come in and replace it or put another one in. Or like Joe said, we don't know what they're running through it. Might be gas this month, but they might be running oil through it next month, and then tar sands oil, all these things. So the key is that they are going to make tons of money. They buy all the politicians with the money, but what they forgot is they're not supposed to be able to buy our constitutional rights with their money. And we have to remind them of that, because after all, they're seat warmers. That's what I call politicians. They're warming the seat until the next person gets in there. And it's us that gets to put them there. Remember, forget about DNR on this issue. It doesn't matter. Figure out who's standing up for you and your private property rights. That's all you want, is somebody representing you. That's the bottom line.
All right, so we'll take a couple more questions, and I think we'll call it a night after that. So does anyone else, any final questions now? I see 1 and 2, and we'll call it a night after you guys. So go ahead.
It sounds like it would be a really good idea to limit the number of compressor stations for a lot of reasons, and, health reasons and pressure reasons and everything. So I was wondering, towns would have to limit all industrial activity in the town, right, in order to eliminate a compressor station from the town, or keep a compressor station out of the town.
All right, so her question was, it makes sense to limit compressor stations for a number of reasons. I guess if I'm going to interpret, you're asking, how do we limit the number of compressor stations?
I'm assuming we have to ban fracking in a town.
Right, and the question is, what can you do, I guess, on the local level? So I'm going to hand it off to, I'll give it to Joe.
Well, what we've learned is that towns have a lot of power using their zoning authority and what's called police power. Generally, that's called home rule. At first, the industry told us that we didn't, and promised to sue us, and they have, and they've lost all 4 times they've sued us. It will be decided in the Court of Appeals this spring. But generally, it follows a series of decisions in gravel mining that interpretive law that's very much the same. Most of us objectively think that it's going to be upheld. So the towns can use their zoning codes, or even towns without zoning codes can impose restrictions on industrial activity, saying, you can't do it in this zone. You can't put a new plant next to my elementary school. Or you can't put a new plant anywhere in my town. That's the general concept here. You can't regulate either fracking or a compressor. A town over in western New York just lost a case because they wanted to set the decibel levels, the noise levels, lower than the FERC standard. And it was ruled, you can't do that, that's regulation. They can say, if you carefully draft a zoning amendment, that you can't have a compressor station in our town, period. Or you can't have it in certain zones.
Can they single out a compressor station? Can they single out it, like some people might say,
well,
some people might not want a compressor station, but they...
You can do it any way that it works in your town. In different towns, one of the problems we have in a lot of towns is that many town board members have leases, and that skews things, I'll put it. In the town that I live in, Preble again, northern Cortland County, the town board next Monday night will be reviewing a broad, multi-page amendment to the zoning code that will ban industrial drilling and all associated activities. Part of that definition is compressor stations. And now, large-scale propane stations, propane storage terminals. If you have a town where that looks like it can happen, Helen and David Slotky and Ithaca are the experts in that. I've worked with them on many levels, and they know how to write a law. A lot of lawyers mean well trying to help towns, but they write laws that are subject to being attacked in court because of that legal distinction between just plain banning and regulating. But a town can say, you can't have a compressor in our town. And if you have a town where you think that's possible, then contact us and we'll help you work with the SWAT piece and get one that'll stand up.
It wouldn't be in my town, Spencer, but
Real quick, there's a map of a lot of the pipelines here. The Constitution is the red one you see going from Pennsylvania up to Albany. And then there's a little one there that is green, and that's mine, 33 miles. On our 33-mile pipeline, they were told, Vera was told when she was at the meeting about, before they were building it, that they weren't going to need any compressor stations. That's interesting. There's a dozen on there now. Okay? And then Constitution line is kind of interesting, because in their filing, they only put one, way up here in Schoharie County, almost in Albany, one. Now, if my little 16-inch pipeline that goes 33 miles needs a dozen compressor stations along it to push the gas, how can a 122-mile, 30-inch line think they're going to push gas from Pennsylvania to Albany, New York? It's not going to happen. So that's another bait and switch. And why don't you want a compressor station in your neighborhood? Well, we had one blow up in 2012. In March of 2012, the Lathrop one exploded and lit on fire, owned by Williams. Then the one that Joe showed you, Windsor, that released gas during a lightning storm and had a huge explosion that was seen for all over the county. And then the one he talked about, that's the Central HP in near us in Brooklyn Township, blew up, lit on fire a year later after the Lathrop. So these things explode and light on fire. And it just so happens that all 5 that have happened in the last year and a half are owned by Williams. So that is a key thing. They need compressor stations. If you can limit those, that is another thing that would stop them from doing it, unless they're going to sneak them in later.
All right, so you've got a question?
Just a couple of quick ones. You mentioned hitting a pipeline when they were digging 75 feet away. Does that mean you can't trust the yellow poles?
Okay, so the question is, can you? So what's the other question? And we'll try.
And the other one is, in a residual danger, if you abandon a pipeline, does it remain dangerous?
Okay, so there are 2 questions. One is, can you trust the poles in terms of trying to figure out whether to dig or not? The second question is, if you abandon a pipeline, does it remain dangerous?
I was able to, I know somebody that's working on the pipeline safety group, and the company's just released a brand new video, the company that put pipeline in, and they say you don't trust any little pole that's in the ground, even if they put it in there, forget it. You call the 811 before you dig, and then they come and try to figure it out. But even the company that installs them doesn't know where they are. That's how crazy this is. And secondly, I don't know. I think it's even worse to just let it deteriorate until one does blow up. That's exactly what happened. I was born not too far from San Bruno, but to watch an entire area of the neighborhood just blow up and light on fire. Because when you don't understand, when these things open up and they shoot flame out, it's a multi-100-yard flamethrower that burns over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, which means it's not like a house fire where after the fire that runs fast, you've got some frames of bed frames there and your refrigerator's there. When you're in the way of one of these fires, it carbonizes everything. Everything becomes carbon dust. There's not anything. It levels everything. It'll burn brick. It'll burn everything. And that's what they saw down in West Virginia about 8 months ago, a year ago, when they had the big fire down there. It actually melted asphalt across a 2-lane highway. It melted the asphalt for about 700 feet and just rolled right off of there. So they're not telling you the danger of it. They're all happy and smiles and telling you how great this is. But you need to look up the dangers, and that's what you should fight, is having it on your property where it's an inherent health and safety risk for you and your family or your schoolyard. So that's my idea, would be fight it that way.
To your second question.
Any residual danger for an abandoned pipeline?
Well, it just seems to me that if you take the gas and the pressure out, you certainly lessen the danger.
Yeah,
and we know that, for instance, this abandoned Sun Oil pipeline is about 20 years. Well, we thought it was 20 years, then I just saw it. It's been at least 10 years they haven't used that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no explosive product within it to blow up. So it's, I'd rather have one with nothing in it than one with 24 inches and 1,200 pounds per square inch. I don't think there's much of a danger after you remove the petroleum product. That's
so it clears out.
My agreement with Laser, which is now with Williams, says when they do finish with it, they have to go and sever it. They have to sever a section and open it now whether Williams will be involved in it, that's another problem, as these guys switch. It's like switching horses. The name of the company that owns the thing in your neighborhood switches and switches and switches and switches. So pretty soon, the guy that's running it now, bought it for a lot of money, so they don't want to put any maintenance money into it. So we're seeing a lot of problems, including with other ancillary equipment. And Joe's right. We all coined the word infrastructure. They like to use infrastructure, like it's roads and highways and bridges, but really this is all part of the entire, it's gas that's running through these, and whether it's liquefied, compressed, or dry or wet, it's all the same thing. And so we have to look at it that way, because that's their strategy. So we have to look at it that it's just a simple pipeline across your property. This is part of the whole mess. If I like it, great. If I don't, I need to be against the infrastructure also.
So I saw one last burning one, and then we'll, one more burning question, and then we'll call it a night.
Is that me? I don't have a question, it's a story though.
Is it quick?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
About how the companies don't know where their pipelines are. I was freaked out when I saw one of these announcements about a proposed pipeline that showed a pipeline going a quarter of a mile north of my house. And I was very unhappy about this, and the pipeline was named, and so I did some research, and I found that this was actually an existing pipeline. Of course, there is no pipeline there, but it had a name, so I followed it through all the sales. It was a pipeline that goes 7.5 miles northeast of my house. This map is on their website. They don't even know where their pipeline is.
So the measurement was 7 miles off. So I'm going to take a minute right now. I really want to express appreciation to everyone who came and traveled distances to be here. Thank you very much to Craig and Joe. Let's give them a quick round of applause. Thank you very much for filming. This will be up online, I believe, in due time.
Vera will be faster.
Vera will be quicker. Please get in touch with us. Put your name on the, there's a sign-in sheet if you want to continue receiving information. Please be in touch with us if you have any and all questions. And again, thank you very, very much to everyone for coming out tonight. Have a safe trip home.